Welcome to another episode of Mindful City, Tuning into Life, a podcast that brings you an intimate exploration of the businesses, practitioners, and artists making an impact in our community. Join us on Patreon for an exploration of all the people, places, and things that raise consciousness in our community by telling us about the businesses and happenings you'd like to know more about, and we'll explore them for you. Welcome to another episode of Mindful City, Tuning into Life. Today, I'm very happy to have with us Emily O'Brien. I met Emily actually through an Ayurveda cooking Facebook group and reached out to her in regards to some catering and Ayurvedic teaching, cooking of Ayurveda at an upcoming retreat. And in the process of us chatting, I really knew that there was so much more that I could learn about Ayurvedic cooking and you all in the community here. And so I've invited her to join us for the podcast. Emily is an Ayurvedic practitioner, a yoga instructor, and does Ayurvedic cooking as well as holistic cooking for her clients and community, as well as educating others about Ayurvedic cooking. So I'm really looking forward of diving deep into this concept of just eating well, but also eating properly for who you are. And so, Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I sometimes feel that I can't do justice to someone's story and, what brings them and gives them the passion for what it is that they do. So I wanted to just give you a moment to share a little bit about how you came to Ayurveda, to holistic living, and what your passions is as you're moving forward in healing others and sharing this knowledge with others.
Yeah, sure. So I started my journey really with yoga. And I practiced Ashtanga yoga for many, many years. And then I became pregnant. And when I became pregnant and I couldn't do the same sort of asana that I was doing before pregnancy, while I was still coming to my mat every day and getting into my body and my breath, I realized that I needed something else. It didn't feel complete anymore in a way. I needed to get deeper into myself in a different way that I hadn't really realized that I needed before I couldn't do all the poses as deeply as before. So that's really when I started to get more into an overall holistic approach toward life, just sort of took it a deeper, like a step further, right? Mm-hmm. So that's really when I started to learn about Ayurveda more and realizing how intertwined it really was with yoga and how it really completed the circle of this practice and of this way of living. So I went to school for Ayurveda, for Ayurvedic medicine, Ayurveda practice. And that was really, really wonderful. It was so much fun. I loved it. And I do plan on continuing my education with Ayurveda more and more as I, continue throughout life. But what I really started to fall in love with during my practice and during my studies was the food and this way of eating in a way that was mindful of ourselves and what was actually happening in the body, because what is healthy for me is not going to be healthy for another person, and vice versa. So when I really started to get in touch with that and in touch with my body in a new way that was more intuitive, I really fell in love with food and cooking in a whole new level. So I started just playing more in the kitchen and making more food. I always sort of made my own food for the most part, but it wasn't great. It wasn't like awesome food or anything. I did grow up with like a mom who cooked homemade meals every night. So I was definitely used to that, but I really wasn't into cooking until I became pregnant. And then I was like, wow, this is a whole new world of like healing myself, right? And the more that I started to pay attention to the food that I was eating and how I was feeling after the food, really turned me on to this whole idea of cooking for other people and starting, really getting into it a lot more. So I'm writing a cookbook now, which is holistic cooking in general. It's not necessarily just an Ayurveda cookbook, but just a lot of cooking from scratch, getting more connected to the food that we're eating and the community within where this food is growing, and really knowing where the food comes from and what it's doing for you on a deeper level. So that's really where I'm at now. I'm just in love with food as of the past few years.
Would you say that Ayurvedic cooking is a science on its own, or?
I would say you could say it was a science. I think when I'm actually in the process of it, it feels more like an art and a meditation. But that's definitely just more my personality too, I think. I'm more of this artsy-ish kind of girl than a methodical, sciencey kind of girl. So
it's interesting because, when we work with Ayurvedic clients or teaching Ayurveda, I find that the overwhelming part for people is the food and the cooking and figuring out what is right for them. Where do we start? Where do we start when we say Ayurvedic cooking? Because first of all, people are like, cooking number one is already a challenge. Now we're talking Ayurvedic cooking. So where do we start, as someone who's been teaching others and you've experimented and just helping people along the way? What would you say?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, I think ultimately we have to understand what Ayurveda is, right? If we're going to cook Ayurvedically, we have to understand the practice of Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is, it translates to the science of life or the wisdom of life. And, the whole idea with Ayurveda is, the goal, you could say, is like, we want to find perfect health or ultimate health, right? So in the body and in the mind, so that we can start to move forward and explore life more in a spiritual way, to really start to experience being human. We all know that when we don't feel good, we can't fully be here in life. Like we are focusing on just healing ourselves and feeling better again so we can get back out into the world. So Ayurveda really is a preventative medicine first. So we start from the beginning of taking care of ourselves so that we can live our fullest expression of our human self. So we want to find health, right? And with Ayurveda, there's this idea that everything in the entire universe is made up of the 5 elements. So we have earth, water, fire, air, and ether or space. And so everything in the entire world is made up of these 5 elements to varying degrees, right? Including ourselves. So our own bodies are made up of these elements. And when we're born, we are born with this original, it translates to original creation. So you have your own unique blend or makeup of the 5 elements, right? In Ayurveda, we call this Prakriti. So our Prakriti is our base, our healthiest version of ourselves, right? When we're born, some of us will have more fire, some of us will have more air, some of us will have more water, right? And then as life goes on, we begin to, we're susceptible to the seasons and the food that is given to us and how much we sleep and just all the elements that we come into contact with every day. And so then we start to, our elements start to fluctuate in the body, right? So now we're not, most of us, sitting here listening now are not in our Prakriti. We're not in that perfect balance of our own creation, right? Now we have too much vata, which is air and ether, right? We have too much fire. We have too much water due to whatever it might be. So the practice of Ayurveda is really coming to understand what your original creation is, what your original doshic balance is, and then to understand the nature of the foods and the activities and the lifestyle that you're living and consuming, so that we can pick and choose the things that are going to bring us back into balance, as opposed to pulling us further out of balance, right? So does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So that's all, that in itself is also a little bit of a science, on a regular
Yeah.
basis. And kind of what you were just sharing is that the elements and the energetics of the food around us, as well as the people and the interactions that we have throughout the day, keep changing, that balance for us. So learning to see what is happening and how we can bring ourselves back into that balance. So I think, yeah, first, the importance of knowing what your original nature is, and then finding ways to keep going, back into that direction.
Yes.
So in terms of food, then, as you were sharing that the elements are in everything that we do, how do we see those elements then in the food that we're eating as
Yeah,
well?
that's a really great question. So with Ayurveda, we have 6 tastes. We have sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. So, sorry, that's my puppy. So each one of these tastes is made of certain elements. And this is kind of the funky part. I think in many cases, it is pretty self-explanatory. Not self-explanatory, but it's pretty intuitive. Like we can look at, a really easy example is like chili peppers. Chili peppers are hot. They got fire in them, right? So like, okay, if you have a pitta imbalance, let's say, so you are experiencing perhaps acne or, loose bowels or like a heartburn, or you're feeling really burnt out, you're sort of like burning the candle at both ends, or you're very critical of yourself or of others, things like this, that's a pitta imbalance. So
which are the elements for the pitta?
Yeah, so fire and just a little bit of water.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're experiencing these pitta imbalances, which is mainly fire, this fire element, you don't want to eat more things that are spicy, right? You don't want to eat the things that are going to heat you up more, right? Or inflammation is another great example of a pitta imbalance, right? Inflammation, fire. So we want to. So let's go through the 6 tastes first. We'll start with sweet. So sweet is made of earth and water. It has a cooling property to it, a cooling action to the body. So the sweet taste would be, this is the most nourishing, the most tonifying taste of them all. So obviously things like dates and, the sweet taste, we know what sweet is. Of course, we don't want to take in a lot of the sweet, like sugar and stuff.
Yeah, everyone will always go to sugar for sweet.
Yeah, totally.
Ice cream.
Right. Oh, okay. I need more sweet taste. Let me go get some Oreos, So actually the sweet taste, so for example, meat, animal products are considered a sweet taste. Also nuts are considered sweet taste. Things that are like dense and oily, avocados have a sweet aspect to them. So things like this, even like cheese, I would say, some cheeses more than others. Some cheeses are a little more sour. So things like that. And you can look at the way that, something tastes in your mouth, like we said, to understand, but also like the way it feels in your body afterward is a good example of how to start to understand what it is. Because even like, so like root vegetables, they're grounding, right? They have more of that sweet quality to them. You can think of the sweet taste, like I said, as being nourishing. It tones the body. It gives the body, a grounding sensation, right? It's earth. So it's water, it's smooth and it's nourishing, right? And then we have the sour taste. So the sour taste is earth and fire. So this is heating, right? It's mainly fire with a little bit of water. So the sour taste, right? We know what sour tastes like. So things, sour yogurt is going to fall more into this category. Fermented foods in general. So sauerkraut, even like kimchi, unless there's a lot of spice in there, then you just get both of them, right? You get the pungent taste and the sour taste. Sourdough would be considered sweet and sour, right? Because
The
sweet,
density, maybe.
it's got that. Yeah, exactly. So, and then even like wine could be considered sour, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fermented things, kombucha, stuff like that would be sour, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to think about what else is in there too. If you're drinking like a ginger kombucha, ginger, that's spicy, right? So you got the
Mm-hmm.
spice in there too. It's not like they can only just be one taste, right?
Right, exactly.
Salty is going to be water and fire. So this one is heating as well because of the fire. So water is generally cooling, but the fire really heats this one up. So salty, it's going to be things that are salty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So salt, for example, is a great one. Also seafood. So, fish is generally considered salty, as well as sweet because it is that animal product again. So it is extra nourishing for the body. And then even like seaweed, stuff like that is going to be salty.
Oh, right.
But I find that the easiest way to get the salty taste into your diet is just by adding salt to your foods, and then you're good to go. And then we have the pungent taste, which is fire and air. So pungent is spicy. It's going to be the jalapenos and the ginger and garlic, things that when you put it in your mouth, you're like, "Ooh, all right, got a little kick there," making me a little hot.
Yeah.
And then we have the bitter taste. So bitter is air and ether. This is like the lightest one of all, air and ether, right? That's like so subtle. So these are more of the leafy greens, especially like arugula, dandelion. You have these bitter greens that you eat, and if you eat it by itself, you're like, "Ooh, yeah, that is a bit of a bite to it there."
Interestingly enough, bitter is my favorite taste. Yeah, I don't know. And I remember someone told me, you don't really know what bitter is, Helen. You have to taste this. And I said, no, I love bitter because I grew up eating bitter melon, and that was my favorite vegetable of all. And I cooked that for them, and they were like, okay, yeah, you take the cake on bitter. And I was like, there's something about that I really love that makes me feel very comfortable in the bitter taste. I don't know why. But yeah.
It's funny because in America, at least, like we don't get enough bitter at all. Like bitter is the one taste that we really have just kind of pushed to the side, and most people need more bitter in their life for sure.
Yeah, so I guess if the in general the American diet is kind of exclusive, excludes the bitter taste, so that makes it for naturally almost imbalanced in terms of food. So because how do these six tastes work together then in a meal? How do you, because is that where you're going with the Ayurvedic cooking? Is okay. So how is it integrated?
Yeah, so you're getting these six tastes. And from here, you want every meal ideally to have all six tastes. So that can sound kind of intense. And how am I supposed to get all six tastes right in one meal? But it's actually pretty easy. And you have to think about, again, what is your imbalance, right? So if you, again, let's just stick with let's do a kapha imbalance. So kapha is earth and water. Okay, that's the dosha. So if you have an earth and water imbalance, so maybe you feel really sluggish, you feel complacent, you maybe have some depression or some lethargy, or you're clammy, or you have water retention, or you have you've gained weight and you can't lose it. Okay, this is a kapha imbalance, and so with kapha, earth and water, right? If you're eating a lot of sweet foods, you're going to continue to perpetuate that kapha imbalance. But if you don't get any, if you're like, oh, I have a kapha imbalance, I cannot have sweet at all, right? Or salty, or, sour, I can't have these things, I have to, whatever. Then you are going to fall into another imbalance, right? Then you're just going to push yourself into something else. So we still want to have a little bit of the sweet taste, for example, for that kapha person, but it's going to be a lot less sweet than, a Vata person who needs that grounding aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So it really does depend on the person here. And that's where it really comes into, like, you have to know who you are and what you're dealing with so that you can figure out that perfect proportion for yourself, right? But let's just stick with this Kapha person. So we still want to have some of the sweet. So let's just say we have a little, like a third of a cup of white basmati rice with our meal. Okay. That's sweet. Grains, sweet, dense, heavy, nourishing, right? And then, so there's sweet. And then for the sour, let's put the sour at the end, right? So, cause that'll be easy. We'll just put like a squirt of lemon on top, right? Something like that, or have especially for Kapha, it would be great to have some sauerkraut or something in there to help the probiotics and help the gut get moving a little bit more. So astringent. I don't think we talked about astringent, but astringent.
I stopped you at bitter.
No worries. So astringent is air and earth. So this is very drying. So astringent is great for Kapha, who tends to be moist, right? That water retention, holding on to water and weight and fat. So astringent is this drying food. So it can be like, beans are a great example, lentils, mung beans, things like that. So if we have some mung beans, some sort of lentil, something on the side, we have our rice, we have our beans. Now we've gotten our sweet and our astringent, right? Then we have bitter. Let's just add some leafy greens, right? We have some arugula, some dandelions, some spinach, some kale, right? Make it like a nice little salad on the side. And then we have salty. So if you want, you could add we could do another vegetable, right? Any sort of vegetable will be good. How about, we want something that's a little more heating. Why don't we add some, because pungent is good for Kapha, right? So getting that heat in there. Kapha's cold. Kapha, and the heat, obviously warms you up, but it also gets things moving. It activates the metabolism. So maybe we use some spices that are like ginger and chili peppers and things like that. You can have some onion in there, saute some onion with your ginger and your chili pepper, get some garlic in there. So you have the pungent, but you're also getting, you're getting some more vegetables too. You could have really any vegetable that you decide to have is fine. Sometimes people get a little intense about the veggies, like, oh, well, I'm Kapha, so I can't have carrots because they're sweet or something, but like you can have some carrots. It's okay. So you want to put some carrots and onions, like saute some veggies and then spice it up with your seasonings, get it a little spicy. And then what else and then the lemon on top, right? So we have rice and beans. We have some sauteed veggies in there with the hotter spices, the ginger, the garlic, the paprika, whatever, and then some leafy greens on the side, put a little bit of oil on top, a little bit of lemon juice, and you got every single taste
in there. That's amazing. So, and do you feel, what is the importance for us to have all the 6 tastes in our meal? How does that work for us throughout the day? What's the importance of that?
Yeah. So, it's very important to have all 6 tastes because we need, and we have all elements within us, right? We need to have each element. We need the doshas to be balanced, all of them. So even if you find that you're a Vata dominant person, you have that air and ether quality more than others, you still need that air and ether, right? It doesn't mean that we want to totally negate it and try to not be that, right? We just need to find like, okay, I know that I'm a Vata person, so I know that I deal with constipation and I need to have some more dal in my life, right? Some more khichdi in my life to ground myself and to make my digestion, like give it a break. You know what I mean? So ultimately, to be able to get all 6 tastes in at least as many meals as you can, it just brings balance. It allows the doshas to all flourish in the amount that they need to flourish in, because it is so important that we don't negate any dosha. We need them for literally just for physical function of our body, right? They all hold really important aspects of physical function in the body and in the mind. So when we're eating all of the foods that all of the tastes, we're able to feed all of the doshas or, temper them if we need to. So it really just allows us to find the balance and keep the balance. It is medicine, really.
I can see that we're definitely going to have you again on the show, because as I'm thinking of all the things that you've been sharing, I can only imagine now that we have a whole section we can go into the spices now that you're putting into the seasoning of the food. And then we're talking about what beverages that you may have. And then you probably, we're having to consider time of the day, season. So, whatever could be the thing. So I think it's really intricate, and we definitely have to bring you back so that we can continue this conversation. But to really, because sometimes it can be overwhelming, for someone. What would you suggest? What are some things that you could say to someone that they can implement now or take a look at now that's something they can very easily put into practice to begin their journey onto eating more mindfully and more holistically and being aware of the elements around them and within them?
Yeah. So I think a really good place to look is to start with your digestion. So, and even as Ayurveda practitioners, generally the first thing an Ayurveda practitioner is ever going to ask you is, how's your digestion? Like, what's going on? So pay attention to how you are digesting food. If you are experiencing a lot of constipation or bloating or gas, right? Then you have, remember, paying attention to the elements that you have there. So that's a lot of air, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that that's vata. If you are dealing with heartburn or burning indigestion, if you have really loose stools or frequent stools, this is pitta. It's fire, it's hot, it's moving fast, it's transforming too fast, right? And then if you have a slower digestion, right? If things feel heavy after you eat and they feel like they're just sitting there and not moving, and you just you eat and then you're like, well, I don't want to eat again for 6 hours because it's like I'm still not hungry or something like that. That's more of a kapha imbalance. That's a lot of heaviness, a lot of earth, right? A lot of water. So paying attention to your digestion and then seeing if you can start to incorporate things that are the opposite of that, right? So if you know, for example, that you are dealing with a vata imbalance, if you're feeling bloated, try to incorporate more heating foods, more soft foods, right? So that we can start to ground that belly and get things a little more under control. So look at your digestion, see if you can start to eat things that are going to be the opposite of that. If you're heavy, if you're slow, if things are not moving, your gut is kind of cold in a sense, nothing's going, you got to heat it up with some fire, right? Mm-hmm. And then besides that, you could, if that seems like a little too much to think about, you could also just look at what's going on outside, right? Because generally what's happening outside is also happening inside of you, or at least it's influencing what you're experiencing inside. So if it's hot out, right? We're in Pitta season right now. We're coming out of it soon, but we're in Pitta season. It's summer, it's hot, right? So we already, naturally go toward the cooling things, right? Like we're going to eat a lot of watermelon. We're going to drink, lots of cooling herbs and peppermint tea and hibiscus tea. And we're, taking cold showers maybe, or going swimming more, looking outside and then seeing how you can balance that on the inside. Again, with vata season coming up, right? It's going to be cold. It's going to be windy. It's going to be dry and things, lots of changing and transformation. So instead, what do? Right? We take our soups, we take our stews, we drink hot tea now. Those things are generally already built into our culture, but being a little more mindful of it is a good place to start too. And if that feels good, move into the digestion, because that's really where you're going to start to take it a new level.
Yeah. No, I think those are and that's incredible information just to begin and to get people started and to be more mindful and more holistic about what they're putting in and being in tune with what's going on, around them. I think that's a great place to start. And I would really love to have you back and we could, tackle a few more topics because I think we could keep this going for quite a while.
Oh, yes.
And then I can get some questions and get some direct questions. I would love to have you back on the show. And thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yes, I agree. It's definitely a very dense conversation that has many layers, multifaceted. We could talk for hours and hours about this and still have so much to cover. So I would love to come back for sure. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. You can find Emily on Instagram at Emily O'Brien Wellness or her website, EmilyO'BrienWellness.com, to find out more about yoga, Ayurveda, and a holistic lifestyle.